name is Tommy Russell. I'm with the Army's Natural Resources Program on Oahu. And today we're going to be talking with Tyler and myself about our ongoing monitoring project. So the main goal of our program is to first and foremost protect Oahu's natural resources, including our rare plants, birds, and snails. And one of the ways that we do that is through the use of automatic trapping grids at a lot of our restoration sites. And in order to ensure the efficacy of those trapping grids, we have to use independent monitoring systems to ensure that we're actually decreasing overall rat activity. And also we are trying to decrease the costs of material and labors as much as we can. So the independent monitoring systems that we use include chew cards, wax tabs, which we've used in the past. We've moved on to tracking tunnels more recently though. And those are cardboard sheets that have ink in the middle of them. And we place those in the protective plastic tunnels. And they're baited, and then we leave those out for a night, one trap night or 2 consecutive days. We put them out in the morning and then come back the next morning and then pull them and then read the tracks. And we can tell what kind of animal activity we have. So we've been using the New Zealand Department of Conservation's best management practices for tunnels, which include 50-meter spacing in between each tunnel station. And again, the 2 consecutive days, like I just said. And we are aiming for 10% or less tracking, which indicates the activity of rats or whatever species we're focusing on. So these tunnels, they're good for tracking activity of small mammals. They are cheap. They're fairly good for other species tracking, including mongoose and things like that. And they are more sensitive than the chew cards or wax, which we've used in the past. However, they are susceptible to wet weather, and if we are unable to go out into the field the second day, we lose that first day of labor, and so that's a cost. They're also susceptible to bait stealing by diurnal species such as mongoose, and they also have a human factor associated with them by the misidentification of animal tracks by natural resources staff. So the purpose of our project is to compare the sensitivity of our tracking tunnels, which we've been using for a while, to camera trapping grid. And we also wanted to see if the camera traps that we used are able to detect more species, or if we're able to differentiate individual rat species. We also wanted to evaluate the logistics that are involved with running a camera trap grid across a large area and to determine the cost effectiveness. So what we did, we had 2 sites. We had 62 Spy.4 Force 10 digital game cams. We had 1 site, Kahanaheiki, which had 38 tunnel stations with our cameras, and we had a reference site, Kapuna, which has 24, and there's no rat control at that site. So we've had them out there since October 2018, and we're going to continue this until the end of August of this year. So what we did is we have these preset tracking tunnel stations out there already. So we just put cameras on trees facing the tracking tunnels. We had them 150 centimeters away from the tracking tunnel, facing down at a 20-degree angle from 50 centimeters up on a tree. And we based that model off of another paper that we've seen of a similar study in New Zealand. So the actual specifications for our cameras and our settings, we used 3-shot picture bursts so that we could have as many pictures of each individual encounter an animal has with our cameras to be able to best ID what we're seeing. And we had a 10-second delay so that we were cutting down on excessive pictures and things like that. And we had them set to run 24 hours so that we could both catch nocturnal as well as diurnal species. And we used rechargeable batteries to cut down on the cost of materials in the long run. We used durable camera mounts so we could place them on any tree. Some of the specifications that we chose to focus on were the trigger speed. So these are motion-activated infrared sensor cameras. So something will move in front of it and then that will set it off. And we compared it to some more expensive cameras, such as the Reconyx HC500 there, and you can see that there's not that much difference with the trigger speed, but there's a vast price difference. So we went with the Spy.point for that, one of those reasons. So the data that we're going to talk about today focuses on the overnight debated tunnel sets. So these are exactly how we've been monitoring them in the past. There's the tracking tunnel, and they have a dated card over the one trap night. We also have a multi-night set of data where there's just a tunnel there. There's no bait or anything like that. And they've been out there for 2 months in between each of our overnight sets of data. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tyler, who's going to talk about more data and our results. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so like Tommy said, we're comparing these to our cards, to our current method. And the way we do this method, we're just looking for presence or absence of that species. We're not looking for the total abundance or how many pictures there were of rats that night. If there were 100 pictures, it just counts as one rat for that night. That's the same we do with the tracking cards. We don't count the number of tracks in that are inked or anything like that. So then we did a chi-square analysis, and here's what we found. So here's our 2 sites. You can see percent activity on the left, and then you have the species, the 4 species that we looked at: rats, mice, cats, and mongooses. You can see that 2, the ones with the asterisks, are significant. So that was rats and cats for both sites. The cameras picked up significantly more activity than the tracking tunnels. You can see for mice and mongooses, it didn't really do that, so I'll kind of get into some of those specifics here. So with the mongoose, we think they're a pretty active animal that's pretty curious and not really afraid of anything, so it wasn't too surprising for us to see that we got the same amount in the cameras as the cards. We were able to get a couple photos with 2 mongoose in one frame. That's pretty cool. With these guys, we can't really tell individuals though, so we can't really track to see if they're going to multiple tunnels. With the cats, we can, so we had this orange cat go to Kahanaiki. This was just 3 photos, but it went to several tunnels, and that was always been our assumption. And the cats will track, they just don't track as well because the tunnel's much smaller than a cat, but they'll go in there. But we figured we weren't getting them all. Same thing with the photos at night. So we were getting cats in the day, at night, and they were visiting several of the stations. If we look at the rats a little closer, we can see that the orange is the tracking tunnels and the blue is the cameras. And this is at Kahanaiki just for the rat species and the percent activity. And normally our goal is 10% or so. So looking at the tunnels, we would have said this year we were around 22% or lower, which is pretty low. It's not our goal, but it's low. And in actuality, we really missed a pretty big spike in December of 76% that was observed with the game cameras. So, but you do see that they do track each other fairly well, and it's generally about 20% higher activity in the cameras than in the tunnels. At Kapuna, the reference side, it was pretty much more of the same, except there was one time in April where we did detect 1 fewer rat in the cameras than we did the tunnels. It could have been due to vegetation, us missing the rat in the analysis. Don't really know why that one is all the way like that. When looking at these rats, these are kind of examples of the photos that we would get. When they were right by the tunnel like this, it was pretty cool because you could do like species identification. You could also look at different factors, like the one on the top left has a strawberry guava fruit in its mouth. So you can really get some other things that you may not be able to get with a tracking card. When they're not right by the tunnel, they're a little harder to see. I don't know if anybody can see these. You'd have to look for things like eye shine. So there's the 2 eyes. And then when you don't get 2 eyes, there's 1 eye. So that one's even harder. And then sometimes they're during the day. And so you need a super good observer like Tommy, and he can find them. And if you don't believe him, there it is, kind of. So good luck, artificial intelligence, with these photos. I'll tell you that. So some considerations. We wanted to evaluate this camera system. So the camera we picked, we had some concerns about the battery tray. We thought the seal wouldn't do very well. We weren't in an extremely wet place. We were in the Waianae Mountains, but it was wet for sure. But actually, the cameras did really well. We did have a 10% failure rate over the course of 10 months, which actually wasn't too bad, I think. Couple of considerations with site selection, the camera placement, we screwed these into trees, and some of the smaller trees would sway in the wind, and we'd get upwards of 2,500 photos a night, and so that was an issue. We also, and you can see in this one, the tracking tunnel is actually right outside the frame of the picture, and so that was only one time though, but it does take a little bit of skill to get them right in the frame. So what about the cost? So we kind of looked at the cost of per tunnel and per camera to run this. And when I'm looking at labor, it came out to about $32 for the tunnels and $16 for the cameras. The reason this is because using our protocol, we wouldn't go back the next day to retrieve that card. You don't need to. So you can save half the labor each check, basically. So even though the cameras cost a lot more than the tunnels, you'll break even at 9 checks. So what's next? If you start looking at the multi-month stuff, maybe we don't have to go back at 2 months, maybe we can go back at 6 months. So then you even have more labor savings, because you will have a delay in when you get your data, but we don't make monthly changes to our grids. We do like annual reviews, so it's fine for us. So the next question, we have all these multi-month pictures now, we have like 200 gigs. Is bait needed? So we can now compare the tunnels that have been sitting out there for 2 months with no bait to see how many rats are there versus the ones that were freshly baited. And then another question would be, is the tunnel needed? Can you just put cameras out there and do some sort of indexing? To do this, we will need some sort of image analysis software because it's a lot of photos. I think this can let us streamline our tracking grids by using less camera stations if they're more sensitive than the tracking tunnels. We might be able to tell differences between the Radis and Exelons and see if we have different species going through our grids at different times. And hopefully we can apply a correction factor to our current tracking tunnel grids that don't have cameras. Something else we got were a lot of pictures of birds, among other things. But if anybody is interested in birds, we have a lot of pictures of birds. So yeah, I'd like to thank Tommy, all his hard work on this, and all the staff at the Army program. Thanks.